There is one specific kind of alienation that most people have felt in their life, which doesn't have an obvious cause or something you can label it as. You may not be exactly depressed, or nothing may be wrong in the way that you could point to and explain or vent about or justify. Your life continues to function, and you continue to show up and do the right things and participate in everything that you must. And underneath all of that, there is this low yet constant hum of something that you literally cannot name. You feel incapable of recognizing it. And in my opinion, all it is the sense that you are watching the whole arrangement from a slight distance, watching somebody live the life that you claim to lead, and going through the motions that everyone around you seems to believe in completely. And somehow you've lost the ability to take any of those things seriously. Albert Camus, one of the most influential writers in Western philosophy, had a very specific word for the exact feeling you're brushing up against. It was called the absurd. It was becoming absurd. And what Camus meant by it was not that the absurd is just things being literally absurd, stupid or random, but instead as a collision. On one specific side was the human need for meaning, the deep and the built-in demand that life itself adds up to something eventually, and there has to be a point for life to reach, or a structure, or simply just a reason underneath all of it all. On the other side, however, there is a universe that offers nothing back to you, absolutely no answer, or no reason or justification to continue, or anything, honestly, just silence. And the absurd, Camus said, is what happens when those two things collide, or when they meet with one another. When you need the meaning, yet the world will refuse to provide the meaning to you. And due to this, most people never fully feel the collision. What they do is they inherit their own meaning. They inherit their religion, or their career, or their family, or their nation, or pretty much whatever the script happens to be wherever they grew up, or whoever they grew up around. And then they decide to live inside of it without ever pressing it hard enough to feel that it doesn't actually hold any specific weight on its own. Imagine there's an anchor tied to your leg pulling you down to the bottom of the ocean, and you're completely stressing over it because you can't swim up, of course, until you realize you've been holding the key the whole time. That is pretty much it. And the person watching this video, you yourself, I think you have pressed on it. You have realized you have that key in your hand, and that is what Camus defines as the whole problem. Because once you've understood, or at least heard of the absurd, you cannot unsee it. And the brutal part behind it is not the seeing of the absurd, but instead the fact that everyone around you is still playing inside that script, which you now know is a script. And they play it completely straight, and you still have to function among them as though you yourself are still following that script. So think about this, right? You go to work, and there's a sort of seriousness to it, right? There's deadlines, there's hierarchies, there's that quiet assumption that you think matters, or at least that this inherent thing matters in some ultimate way, in some overall, overarching way, right? And part of you is watching that and thinking of it, honestly, like an anthropologist, in a sense that someone who wandered into a ritual they don't believe in, right? It's as if you're living the life that you don't think you should be living, yet continuing to live it anyway, because it feels too serious for you to give up. And due to this, you continue to make the small talk with your co-workers, and you continue to hit the quotas or the targets that your boss sets for you, or you perform just the appropriate level of investment into that career, into your current existence. And due to that, again, some part of you is standing slightly outside of your body, asking you yourself, asking your soul quietly, what any of this living is actually for. And that is the loneliness that nobody, even Camus himself, doesn't warn you about when you think and you understand the idea of the absurd. It is not the specific loneliness of actually being alone, but instead the loneliness of being in the room, surrounded by so many people, and feeling like you are the only one who noticed that the floor isn't there. And once it starts, it leaks into absolutely everything. conversations start to feel scripted and milestones start to feel arbitrary, and you're supposed to want the promotion, you're supposed to want your boss to acknowledge you, or the relationship to go well, or the house, a cheap down payment to find a good place to live with your family. You want the markers of a life well lived, or at least you feel like you want them, and in my opinion you do actually want them, because that is how people live their life, but only sort of, because you can't necessarily remember why you want them, and the wanting feels like a borrowed emotion rather than your emotion, and the celebrations for those milestones feel hollow in a sense, maybe slightly, maybe a lot. And even your own ambitions, the one you've had since you were a 7-year-old child, just watching the TV, wanting to be this, wanting to be that, they start to feel like things that you're performing rather than things that you yourself actually authentically need. And you can't say any of this out loud, you can't tell anyone about this, because when you try to tell anyone, or when you try to even think about it, it comes out sounding like ingratitude. You're not happy with the life you're living, or sounds like depression, or sounds like anxiety, or a phase that you're going through, or some edgy teenage nihilism that you may have grown out of, or you should have grown out of by the time you were 16. And the people who love you look at you and get worried and defensive when you start telling them about this feeling. So eventually you just stop saying it, and you continue to stay behind the glass, watching the life that you should be living, and then carry it alone. And that, in my opinion, is the biggest thing that makes the situation worse. That is what makes the absurd so extremely absurd. That's what makes the alienation feel like alienation. It makes it so much worse, because now you're no longer just outside the script. You're outside it secretly and performing your way through a life that you are no longer convinced by, and not living even with no one to admit it to. So Camus, he didn't think this was a malfunction, and in my opinion, that is the very part that is worth holding on to in this entire scene. Even though I told you that there wouldn't be a resolution, and there isn't one, right? You expected some sort of resolution here, I'm sure of it. You expected me to tell you that, okay, well, now that you feel this way, now that you know you feel this way, now that everyone is telling you stop feeling this way, I'm here to tell you that this is what you should do instead. But that's just not how it works. Honestly, with the absurd, Camus thought the absurd was simply the truth. It was just the world that we lived in. It was as much as an accurate perception or representation of the actual situation as anything else could possibly be. And the people who don't feel the absurd aren't more sane than you, nor have they, I guess, lived life better than you have. But instead, Camus just says they've never looked directly at the very thing that you yourself cannot stop looking at. Your alienation, your isolation, and the feeling of not being inside the feelings, if that makes sense, is not a sign that something is broken inside of you. It's not a direct example that you yourself are a crazy person and you need to go to a therapist. Because in my opinion, and I agree with Camus wholeheartedly here, it might be the very honest response, the most honest response available to a clear-eyed person in this kind of world that genuinely doesn't come with a meaning attached. If the universe isn't going to give you any sort of meaning, isn't going to provide you with any sort of justification for living, why would you yourself stop living the life that you must live to create that meaning? If that makes sense, right? It makes a lot more sense in my head, but I don't think that fixes it. Knowing this doesn't fix it, but being clear-eyed, again, that doesn't fix the universe or fix the world that you live in, but I think it's just the fact that you now know that the collision is still there, and the fact that it doesn't hand the meaning back that makes not going anywhere in life and having to get up tomorrow and participate in a system that you can see through tolerable, in a sense that you know that one day you can strive for something better. Because if you're living the life that you don't enjoy, and you're living the life of repetitiveness, and you are unaware that this life is so repetitive, how would you ever break free from that system of repetition? I think you must know what it's called, and at least now you do know what it's called. I think you must know what it is called, and at least what it is, label it as something so that you can stop malfunctioning and instead feel awake in a room of people who are, I guess in a sense, still asleep. And in my opinion, that idea of being awake is somehow both the gift and the entire cost of absurdism.